All right. Thank you, Cardinal Turkson, for a warm welcome. And I know I've heard a lot of comments about the beauty and just the majesty of this place and the honor we get to be here together. So thank you for hosting us and joining us. I know you have a busy schedule. Thank you to the panelists this morning for our provocations and insights and questions about AI, where you all teed it up really well at the end. Shifting to some of these questions about human flourishing, and particularly the question of relationality that John and Father Baggett left us with at the end. That will be a theme of our discussion now. But what we'll do now is we're going to spend some time really going deep into human flourishing. And we have some incredible experts here from around the world to share their insights. They've been a part of a collaborative exercise over the last year to develop a framework together that is a living, ongoing process that will be updated and addressed and challenged and critiqued and updated again. And then also, I think through this learning process of engaging with our technology partners and partners in business and philanthropy through action, through learning through action as well, and through participatory experiences. I know Mila and others are going to talk about that later today. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But before we get into slides, we have slides. We need to go through slides, unfortunately, but hopefully Matthew's teams have done a great job of making them beautiful. Before we go into slides, and before I give our introductions to our distinguished guests, I want to just take a moment to actually read a poem. And part of why I think we're incorporating poetry is just to access that part of us as human beings that is not totally rational. There's something else there that's going on when poets are writing. And I chose a selection from T.S. Eliot, who you all know well, but it's just a short stanza of his work. You can close your eyes if you want. You can keep your eyes open. And if you want to listen to the birds in between that Julian mentioned last time that John brought up today, that's part of the poem as well, brings that up. Burnt Norton by T.S. Eliot, stanza 1, 4 quartets. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. All time is eternally present. All time is unredeemable. What might have been is an abstraction, remaining a perpetual possibility, only in a world of speculation. What might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. Footfalls echo in the memory, down the passage which we did not take, towards the door we never opened, into the rose garden. My words echo thus in your mind. But to what purpose? Disturbing the dust bowl of rose leaves, I do not know. Other echoes inhabit the garden. Shall we follow? Quick, said the bird, find them, round the corner. Through the first gate, into our first world, shall we follow the deception of the thrush. Into our first world, there they were, dignified, invisible, moving without pressure over the dead leaves in the autumn heat, the vibrant air, and the bird called in response to unheard music hidden in the shrubbery. And the unseen I-beam crossed where the roses had the look of flowers that are looked at. There they were as our guests, accepting and accepting. So we moved, and they in a formal pattern, along the empty alley, into the box circle, to look down into the drained pool. Dry the pool, dry concrete, dry, brown-edged, and the pool was filled with water out of sunlight. And the lotus rose quietly. The surface glittered out of heart light. And they were behind us, reflected in the pool. Then a cloud passed, and the pool was empty. Go, said the bird, for the leaves were full of children. hidden excitedly, containing laughter. Go, 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 said the bird. Humankind cannot bear much reality. Time past and time future. What might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. So we wanted to stay in this this presence and this reflection, and take you through on a journey of some content and some work that we've developed as a team, and really present it for your reflection and your questions. But first, I want to introduce the team that's worked on this and speak to some of their backgrounds. First, Dr. Tim Lomas from Harvard University is the psychology research scientist in the Department of Epidemiology at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health and part of the Harvard Human Flourishing Program. Dr. Lomas's main research is focused on cross-cultural expertise or experiences of well-being, cross-cultural perspectives, especially concepts and practice deemed non-Western. Current projects include the Global Flourishing Study, which we'll speak to a little bit later this afternoon and get into some of the details of that tomorrow, is a longitudinal study of 240,000 people in 22 countries. He's helping lead the Global Wellbeing Initiative, a collaboration with Gallup, to develop and analyze new items for the world poll that reflect non-Western views of flourishing and well-being. And he's also created a really cool lexicography of words that are untranslatable in different languages, which is very interesting if you're curious about words, which I am. Another colleague and friend that I get to introduce is Dr. Julianne Holt-Lundstadt. If you all have heard and read the report on the epidemic of loneliness, Julianne was the one that researched that and wrote that for the Surgeon General, and has really been one of the leading thinkers in the United States, but also in the world on this question of loneliness and social isolation, and the question of belonging. How do we belong, and what role does belonging have in our well-being? She's a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Brigham Young University. She's also directs the Social Connection and Health Lab. She's advised the Foundation for Social Connection, which we've collaborated on, and the Global Initiative on Loneliness and Connection. She's advised the World Health Organization and developed the national strategy for addressing loneliness in the United States. We're very excited to have you here again after our collaboration of the last year. Next is Dr. James Pavelski, who's a professor of practice and director of education at the University of Pennsylvania's Positive Psychology Center. The University of Pennsylvania has been a key partner and collaborator on this work. He's also the adjunct professor of religious studies, Fulbright scholar, and a PhD in philosophy. And he founded the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project and recognized as a National Endowment for Arts lab. He's done multiple works, and he's written a book with his amazing wife, Susie, who we've gotten to know and will be with us later, and will be sharing with us about the role of culture and arts in flourishing. Lindsay Odes, I think, gets the award for the longest travel to come see us and be with us today. He's from Australia, from Melbourne. He's one of the leading experts on well-being as it relates to public policy. He's a researcher and academic. He's a director of the Center of Wellbeing Science and a professor at the University of Melbourne. He's also non-executive director of Action for Happiness. What a beautiful phrase. Australia, and the Positive Education Schools Association. He's the former co-editor of International Journal of Wellbeing. Dennis Snower, who's going to speak later and has also been a key part of our work on the quantitative side, but also the conceptual side as well, is the founder and president of Global Solutions Initiative, distinguished professor at Oxford within the Institute for New Economic Thinking. He was president of the Kiel Institute and a World Economy professor of economics. He's also a non-resident fellow of Brookings, and the list could go on and on and on. But he's one of the special things about Dennis is just his humility, even in the context of having so many incredible degrees and experiences. And we were excited to get his experience and expertise on the role of economics. We've already brought that up as a key question. And then last is Elizabeth Kincaid, who is the director of the, oh, I think I left the paper out here, sorry. Elizabeth is director of the Ethics and Public Policy Center at Loyola University, and has focused on moral psychology and really has provided a key insight into some of these questions about the role of the sacred, the role of the moral values that are going to be a heart of what we're going to talk about today. I've really appreciated her perspective and contribution in some of these questions of ethics and morality, and also as it plays out in social justice is a big part of her research as well, and has been looking at the questions of business. How does social justice apply in a business context, and how do we take these questions of the Catholic social teaching for people that are from a Catholic perspective in the business world, but then also broader for other perspectives as well. So thank you all for coming again. I'm going to do the presentation quickly, and then we'll turn to you all for some questions. This is, let's see if slides work. What's that? Oh. Okay, great. So we've already heard the challenge this morning. I won't go into that. You all have articulated the challenge well in terms of technology is exponentially developing, and it's unclear what the end is for humanity. We're in some ways accelerating our means to an unimproved end. This is from Martin Luther King's Nobel Prize winning speech, where he referenced the poetry of Thoreau, where we're developing improved means, but we don't really understand where are we going. What's the goal of what we're doing? What we're working on is a way to think about ends together, a way to frame ends together. And you all have at your desk here a version of this that's blown up as big as we can, but we'll go through each part of it. So don't worry about elements of this. You won't be able to see it on the screen. What are the goals of what we're developing here in building the Human Flourishing Framework? First, create an improved end for our means, build a way to frame success in addition to GDP. We'll talk about later today and then tomorrow, build a useful digital tool to track and measure flourishing on a global level. There's amazing data that's coming out from our partners. How do we use that in a way that can be displayed, that it can be actionable? And one of the things we talked about in the group is various academics are working on this topic of flourishing. How do we create a shared cartography of flourishing across different maps? So each entity, each group has their own map of what flourishing is. How do we have a shared language, shared symbology? Academics are going to think about it in terms of maps. Technologists are going to think about it in terms of blueprint. We'll talk about that later, but we want to maintain a flexibility in how we're thinking about it. How will this be used? Inspire individual collective action, measure flourishing globally. We've got some educators in the room, so think about how do we have a more holistic view of education? How do we align business and technology to serve flourishing? And then one thing that I've been involved in is on the policy side, something Dennis is very involved in, is how do we align the measurement of policy to measure flourishing, not just GDP? What were some of the principles that we used? We talked about it already. Use a living, ongoing process. We speak the truth, seek the truth in the spirit of friendship and intellectual humility. There's multiple disciplines. There's multiple languages. There's different ways of seeing truth. We had to come at it from a real sense of humility. Build on ancient and modern wisdom, so that present and future again, and past. Find common ground among different ways of knowing. So there's a rational way of knowing, there's a relational way of knowing, there's an embodied way of knowing. I think Mila's going to talk to that later. Engage different demographics and geographies. I think we've just started to do that in the Global Flourishing Study, but I think this is the next chapter of what we're doing together. And then look for ubiquitous patterns across humanity. There's no one universal experience or definition of flourishing, but that we are seeing patterns. How do we identify what those patterns are and use that to form our work? And then build off. There's an incredible extensive work that's been done on flourishing, well-being, and sustainability research across multiple disciplines. How do we build on that and incorporate that? So the first thing we worked on was a definition. If anyone was in the Humanity 2.0 forum last time around, we had a starting definition that we were working with. It was a very heated debate. There's a debate about whether you should even have a definition at all. But for our work, we need a definition. We need a way to have a shared perspective on what we're actually even talking about. And what we came to in these series of working groups was human flourishing is the ongoing process, really realizing one's own good and the common good by fulfilling human capabilities. And I'll unpack what each of those mean. But at the core of it, it's about an ongoing process. It's not a state. We're never fully there. It's something that's in development. It's about fulfilling the potential. It's about achieving one's own good. But at the core of it, it's this relationality between our own good and the common good. So based on Tim's work and Tyler's work at the Harvard team within the Human Flourishing Program, we've settled on the research is finding that there's kind of these ubiquitous descriptions about how people talk about individual good in their life. If you wanted to boil down like the most important things out of the slide deck, this is probably one of the most important slides. This is based on public health research, based on social science research that Tyler and the team have done, and then now it's getting even further validated and tested in the Global Flourishing Study, which Tim can talk to. So do I have a sense of meaning and purpose in my life? Do I have close social relationships, which we talked about this morning in the panel? Am I becoming a better person? Am I experiencing happiness and life satisfaction? That's the one that's easy for us as moderns to focus on. We tend to forget some of the others there, but health, both mental and physical. And then as a kind of undergirding component is financial material stability. We see that when people don't have that, it tends to erode the other elements of flourishing. So how is flourishing related to the common good? So the root word of flourishing is Latin florere, to bloom, to blossom, to flower. And individual flourishing is like a flower. It came up in T.S. Eliot's poem about the rose, in that it's both an individual entity, but it's also embedded in social and environmental context. So flourishing is fundamentally about relationality. And I will say one other shout out goes to beyond Matthew Lee, who's been really critical of this, his father, Ezra Sullivan, who couldn't be here today, but he was critical in the development of this content, and this in particular. And then this builds on some of the work that Tim and Tyler have done in their piece on metaphors for flourishing. The other metaphor that Tim and Tyler have shared is how is flourishing related to common good is like a musician in an orchestra. An orchestra cannot make beautiful music unless it has individuals that are playing. The individual can't play without the rest of the folks. So there's the idea of balance and harmony, which is key to flourishing. So the framework characteristics. So if you look at the very center of the framework you have on your desk here, we really wrestled with, this is something Elizabeth can speak to, but we really wrestled with this core of what is the end of a person. And Father Sullivan and others brought forth this idea in our last time about God, spirituality, etc. We really wrestled through this topic, but what we came to is this idea of this relationship to the sacred or the divine. And we debated about whether to use a word, and I'll let Elizabeth talk to that, but at the end of it, we thought of a symbol, a rose. And this rose is about our highest purpose. It's about, it could be, for some people it's God, for some people it's their relationship to their ancestors, nature, etc. But there seems to be a ubiquity across humankind that people have this sense of something beyond themselves that transcends them. And we wanted to make sure, based on the research and the reflection, that was core. The next ring out is this idea of values, which I know I've learned a lot from Dennis on this topic and others from our panel. We live according to perceptions of value. Value in other people, value in nature, value of an object. You all walked through nature this morning, you walked around beautiful architecture. There's a sense of value there. Human values are incredibly diverse. But what we're trying to understand is, is there some level of commonality in the midst of the diversity? And one of the useful frameworks we've found, both from the research of Ian McGilchrist, who's a psychiatrist who's really studied the brain, and he builds on Max Scheller, is this idea that while we have very diverse values, there seems to be a pattern, different types of values. First, values of the useful. Does this thing, person, experience provide pleasure or utility to me? So you can think of modern economics as built on that first one there. The second is the values of the vital. What do I see as admirable in other people? Virtuous capabilities, their courage, their humility. Values of the real. Is this true? Is there harmony there? Do I see a moral framework that I'm engaging with? And then the fourth, the value of the sacred, which we've touched on already. Again, wide diversity, but are we seeing some emergence of something that has this dynamic to it? And you can think about when you know that people have violated, like I think John was speaking to this to some degree, when we talk about AI. When we think about, is something being violated in an expedient pursuit of the useful in someone's dignity or someone's agency? That's where this dynamic happens, where there's a debate or a dialogue or a fight between values. Then we looked at a core thing that I know Lindsay provided some incredible contributions on this. There's a whole field that's thinking about capabilities. At the core of human flourishing is the development of human capabilities. And we're building off of Martha Nussbaum, Amartya Sen, various folks, all the way back to Aristotle. This is, what do we share with plants? What do we share with animals? Some people have a frame that we share everything with animals. Some people think we have very unique things, but there seem to be capabilities that we need to be thinking about, especially as we're thinking about AI. Do these technologies develop or degrade our capabilities? Even the parts that are relative to plant life and to animal life. We are embodied creatures. So how do we think about those capabilities? We did wide-ranging research and reflection on different capabilities and built a categorization of 7 physiological. So you can think about all the capacities of the body and of our kind of physical capabilities, our mental capabilities. I mean, our physical capabilities, behavioral. So what we make and do. This includes play. This includes work. Social, which we've touched on already in terms of our social capabilities. So when we think about, is AI encouraging or developing our social capabilities, or is it degrading? That would be a question we would use this framework for. Emotional and psychological, in terms of the development of our emotional capabilities. Cognitive and intellectual, volitional, which is about the development of our character. And then finally, the spiritual. Many of the lists and research don't include spiritual, but based on some of the research that's been done on the impact of spiritual well-being, spiritual practices and spiritual community on other elements of flourishing, we put forward that as a capability as well. I won't go through all of them. We'll send out the full presentation to you all so you can read through all of them, but I'll pick out one that we've already talked about, social. So you can think about, we have person that has really warm, strong relationships. That's essential to human flourishing, and the capabilities that we develop to develop those social relationships as part of that. Spiritual capabilities, which we talked about, which can include reflection, can include contemplation, receptivity. There's a whole category of being holiness or being related to the whole, related to the wholeness of spirituality. And then the next category out is a category where we have less influence on and influence us. So we are kind of embedded in these elements of who we are. So Aristotle would call them accidents of the individual. We consider them our place of birth, our age, our affiliation within a particular group. Some of them are changeable, some of them are not. You know, physiology now is more changeable than it used to be. But age, unfortunately, as a parent of 2 children at 46, I can't make myself 26. It's just part of the reality of where I'm at right now as a person. So it's important to know these, but they aren't necessarily central to our flourishing. They are important when we think about equity and inclusion and all other kinds of justice questions and fairness questions. Facilitators, this is as we move further out into the common good. We categorize 7 or 8 categories: social relationships, religious communities, education, economics, and finance. Those first 4 come out pretty strongly in the Harvard research in terms of pathways to flourishing or facilitators for flourishing. But we've also discovered and talked about additional ones, including political governance, culture, arts, and humanities, which James has very passionately worked on and contributed to the field. The natural environment, it's obvious that we can't flourish without the environment flourishing. And there's not just a physical relationship, but there's also something spiritual happening there too. Health systems, and then virtuous technology. So these are the facilitators of flourishing, and we're wanting to know the relationship between ends, values, abilities, influences, and flourishing. I'll just briefly, one facilitator would be social relationships: family, friendship, community, free association. You think about that kind of as the heart of modern democracy, is our ability to associate. And then solidarity is a term that, and a concept that I know Dennis will talk about later, is that sense of trust and social trust. If we don't have social trust, if we don't have broader capability to work together, then our ability to facilitate belonging breaks down. Economics and finance, broad category, but work and employment, productivity, financial stability, this idea of just remuneration or fair payment for your contributions. So you can agency, you can see these and see real implications for how we think about artificial intelligence and new technologies. Natural environment, which we spoke to earlier, which is our relationship to natural ecology, our ability to steward nature, our access to clean water and air, access to natural resources, biosphere. This is the whole field of sustainability. So in summary, this is kind of our attempt to get the most holistic perspective on human flourishing, and really have a way to frame and understand vast sources of data, vast efforts that are being done to understand human flourishing, and then bring that to bear into these conversations about AI, but also apply it in other contexts. So thank you for being patient and walking through each of the content that we're developing here together. I want to first turn to James and give you an opportunity to talk about why do you think culture and arts and humanities are essential for human flourishing? Why are they something that we incorporate?